Good morning and welcome to your Partner in Success Radio. I'm your host, Denise Griffitts. And as always, I am so glad that you're spending part of your day here with us. This podcast is about leadership, business, personal growth, and the deeper conversations that shape who we are and how we serve. And today's conversation is one that touches all of us because honestly, at some point, every single one of us will encounter grief. We cannot avoid it. Joining me today is Chaplain Candi Wuhrman. She is a board-certified clinical chaplain, a longtime hospice chaplain, a spiritual counselor, and grief transformation coach. She is also the author of the powerful new book, MOXIE, and I love this title, MOXIE. You don't hear that word very often. MOXIE, a hospital chaplain's journey through grief. And before we go any further, I want to thank our sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by the Blaine Group Incorporated, led by my very dear friend and somebody I have enormous respect for, Devin Blaine. The Blaine Group is a total communications agency with nearly 50 years of experience helping businesses, authors, and leaders elevate their voice and share their message with the world. From strategic public relations and media placement to branding, crisis management, and marketing communication, Devin and her team craft campaigns that generate visibility, credibility, and real results. So whether you're launching a book, building your brand, or seeking broader exposure in your market, the Blaine Group has the tools, the expertise to get you noticed. Learn more about the blainegroup.com, blainegroupinc.com. And one day I'll share with you why I blame Devin for making me do so many podcasts every week. It's all her fault. Just ask her about it. So today on Your Partner in Success Radio, my guest, Chaplain Candi Wuhrman, helps individuals and families transform grief into a path of meaning and healing. And as I noted earlier, her book MOXIE is on my desk, and in it she shares lessons from decades, the bedsides, offering guidance, compassion, and spiritual insight for anyone who's navigating loss. But before we get started, Candi, welcome. For starters, tell me, what's most important for you to bring to others in your work and your life?
Thank you, Denise. Thank you for having me. Oh gosh, it is, I think, my mission really now, having been at the bedside as a hospice chaplain for 2 decades, to really let people know that grief is a nonlinear experience. There are multiple ways that we experience loss, and that when we address our emotions head on, recognize that pain is purposeful, we can grow spiritually. We can expand into something greater, that it has purpose, and resolve the pieces inside of us that hurt.
You can't ignore it. We try. We all try. So, I'll worry about that tomorrow, or I'm over it now. I'm good. You're not.
Yeah, we
You
think we
just,
can bury it. That's what
we
I've
do.
seen. We
We
think we
do.
can take it to our grave.
Yeah.
Mm.
And some people do, I guess, but uh, I don't know. And listen, we're not just talking, you may be talking about, human to human, but some of the worst grief is when you lose a pet.
Absolutely.
It's horrifying.
Absolutely.
I'll be honest with you, and I shouldn't even say
Mhm.
this, but often I will grieve longer and harder for a pet than I do a human because that pet never hurt me. Never stole my
Exactly.
car keys and took off with the car. Never took
I
money out of my wallet. The only way they hurt me was to leave me.
I have many clients that have lost a pet, and what we've discovered when we dive deeply, those pets by their side for, years and years and years, filled a place that never was filled. And we'll get into this, I'm sure, but the accumulated grief that we have, a partner, a pet, a loved one, a job, those things filled this empty hole you said about didn't hurt. They filled that hurt. They're kind of a placeholder for a while. So when that loss happens, it opens up a plethora of deep, deep loss that was never addressed.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, I've had pets all of my life. I don't understand people who don't have pets. I mean, it's a personal choice, but I'm comfortable around animals and they like me back. But I have pets that go back to when I was a child and I still remember them. I can see them.
Oh, sure. And just for an example, we may be going out of order if you have an order, but
No, you've met me. I have to order.
have no order.
No.
Okay, well, good. We'll get along just fine. Um, I have a client who had been married 5 times, and when her male dog died, it it was devastating, and devastating in a way that dog, what we realize is that dog was her protector, which she probably was searching in a partner. But what was really true is that her father and her mother were not protectors.
Mm,
And that's why it was so devastating. And that's the actual grief right there. That's the loss that has to be addressed. And as we go on and we talk about MOXIE, a hospice chaplain's journey through grief, you will no doubt bring up that these are the things that we start to uncover and the things that can be opened up that we can heal that I call spiritual injuries. They're the wounds that have
right.
devastated our internal spirit.
I just wrote that down, spiritual injuries. That makes perfect sense. I don't even need to go deeper into it because I know exactly what you're talking about.
Mm,
And it's something I think we don't actually think about. We just don't think that, these go much deeper than, okay, I'm at the grocery store and I'm mad because somebody ran over my toe with their buggy. There's things that happen. But I think, and I'm just guessing here, that we get so caught up in the day to day and the things that we're worried about, the things that we're concerned about, the things that have just, well, hey, that was fun. I really enjoyed that. And then what the heck right after that? We're so
right.
busy bouncing around that we don't really, I think, sit with ourselves enough and say,
Mhm.
what's really bothering me? How can I fix it? Can I fix it?
Well, we want to get away from the pain.
Right.
And that's what I tell people and teach people and guide people. That pain, excruciating, no doubt, will never minimize that one iota. But that pain is purposeful. So what I mean by that is, what is it telling us? When I in Moxie, I talk about when my mom, I knew because I had been a hospice chaplain for so many years, I knew where we were headed, right? I could see it. I could see it happening. And I literally had a moment where I went to what felt like 3 years old, and I was calling out, "Mama, mama, mama," because what starts to unpack and unfold is our own life review of all those different age stages, all those different experiences of who that person is, and it begins to open up the loss. What will my life be like? Where will my mama be? Questions of afterlife. And then after she died, I'm calling out, "Where are you?" Because I know I'm gonna talk to her, but she hadn't shown up yet.
What do you mean by that?
Meaning how she hadn't shown up yet?
Yeah.
So I believe, and I've had this experience, and I talk about this in the book, that in some way, some shape or form, our our loved ones show up for us. So my dad, who had died 23 years before my mom, I'd be out and I'd see a white butterfly and I would just have this overwhelming feeling of him. And I would think of him and some little message might come from him. And then later when my mom died, literally, Denise, I was standing in my kitchen and I have a hummingbird feeder out on my porch. And I started hearing this clicking. And at the time, I didn't know hummingbirds' their wings go so fast they click. But what hit me was it sounded just like my mom tapping her long fingernails on the kitchen table. And I paused, was stunned. And I really started to kind of feel my mom's presence. And every time now, like a hummingbird comes and it's mom, I'll be talking to one of my sisters or, um, uh, yeah, I mean, there's a message there. So I used to say my mom shows up as a hummingbird. Now
I
what I
love
say,
hummingbirds. Why not?
right? So now what I say though is that hummingbird gets my attention and then I'm with my mom. My mom, I feel her. And I've gotten messages from her. And I told her a few years even before she died, I said, "Mom, you're gonna be able to talk to me after you die." And she says, "Oh," she shut me down. She
Oh,
did say, "Oh my god, you believe that, Candy, but I don't believe that." And it's like, "Okay,
right.
fine. Okay, I know this journey, right?" And this is a new concept for many, and we don't know. We see them in person, right? We think there's nothing. We don't know what's left. We don't know what's on the other side.
We
But
don't, and the veil, I think, if you're paying attention, can be very, very thin between the worlds. I do this in my sleep. I'm a
Mhm.
lucid dreamer,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I will literally, before I go to sleep, I will turn something I always do this, I'll have a problem or issue, a question, and I literally say my prayers out loud, because somebody's listening. And then I
Mhm.
will tell my subconscious, "Listen, I need you to review this for me." And at 3:18, Candy, I
Love it.
I wake up without fail, without fail. And I'm up and down all night long. I don't sleep more than 2 or 3 hours a night. So, I may put myself back to sleep a couple more times, but I do the same thing, the same thing. And I'm telling you, I'm a lucid dreamer, and I'll say, "Okay, I would really like to chat with my brother."
Mhm.
Sometimes he shows up, sometimes he
Mhm.
doesn't, but
Mhm.
then there'll be some instant moment in that dream, like you with the hummingbirds, like, "Hang on, hey, come back, come back here. Tell me what you wanted me to know," and I'll noodle on it all day long.
Yeah, the dreams, I don't I dream actually, I had a dream that I wasn't gonna wake up early enough to be here. Um, but I did wake up. That things like that happen, but I'll wake up and I'll need to address something in the middle of the night. And after my mom died, I was still in Portland and my husband was going back and forth. He wasn't fully moved up here. This was 8 plus years ago now. And all of a sudden I woke up thinking somebody was breaking in. And I get up and I go look at the door's still locked, and I get back in bed, and all of a sudden I hear that same kinda tapping. This was before the hummingbirds even. I hear tapping, like, on the window. Scared the heck out of me,
I bet.
and I thought of my mom, and I'm like all of a sudden I drop, relax, and I go, "Mom, really? You have to scare the heck out of me?" Like, you coulda just gotten my attention in another way, but that kinda stuff happens.
It does, and I have to tip people are gonna think I'm a lunatic, but I suspect they think that anyway, so what the heck. I often when I get in my car and I go somewhere, I take Jeeves with me. I call him Jeeves. He's my guardian angel. Everybody, we all
Mm.
have them. And
Mhm.
I'll get ready to wherever I'm gonna go. "Okay, Jeeves, I'm going here, I'm going there," and I get lost. I mean, I have 0 I'm so directionally impaired
Oh,
that I have
wow.
gotten lost in my own neighborhood. It's 3 streets deep, 3 streets wide, and I have driven right past my house, which is red, so I am directionally impaired. And everybody
Oh my gosh.
I know. I've walked right past it. My dog one time said, "Can we just go back? It's raining." You come on, let's go back. But Yeah, and I'll say, "Okay, Jeeves," and I'm looking over at Jeeves, and I'll be careful not to put my huge bag in his lap because he's sitting right there. I know he is. And I'll say, "Okay, Jeeves, this is where I wanna go. I don't," and I will say, "I'm going here, I'm going there. I don't want anything to happen to me. I want parking when I get there, and I
Mhm.
want the local estabulary to not see me ever unless I need them. So I don't want any tickets." And honestly, nothing ever happens to me. I get where I need to go. I don't get all that lost unless I'm really not paying attention. And then when I get home, "Thank you, Jeeves." Now, does
Mhm.
Jeeves talk back
Mhm.
to me? No, but I know somebody is there with me, if that
Mhm.
makes any sense at all. I'm never
Totally makes sense. Totally makes sense, and I think, this is the evolving spiritual journey. People think because I'm a chaplain that I'm religious, and they start saying, "Well, what religion are you?" And, you know, talk about scripture, and it's not that I can't talk about that, and I do have a lot of training, right, about
Mhm.
theology. But I'll just say this, that our job as a professional chaplain, a board-certified clinical chaplain, it's not my job to guide anyone to particular theology, but I am
Right.
here to walk with you on your unfolding journey of your spirituality. And part of that is the awakening to these different realms that are possible. And that was a piece of MOXIE, of that it was this guiding energy that opened up a world, even for me, who has already in this sort of believed in angels, believed that of an afterlife of sort, of something beyond, seen it, and even felt it and communicated with it. And so I believe that this is part of that expansive mystical journey that is possible for all of us.
I agree with you. And listen, for your background, I'm not sure I covered it properly when we first started, but you are Jewish and you're an interfaith board certified chaplain, as we've talked about, and you're a longtime hospice chaplain. You're also an Army veteran. What did you
Yeah.
do in the Army, and how did that experience influence your spiritual journey? Not religious. Well, as we were talking in the green room, I'm not religious, never have been, but
Mhm.
I do have a lot of spiritual leanings. But how did that experience influence your spiritual journey?
Mm. Well, I was introduced to chaplaincy actually when I was in the Army, and I was out in I was reservist and a National Guard, and I was introduced to the first chaplain ever out in the desolate fields of Muskogee, Oklahoma, early in recovery for a eating disorder and alcoholism, and I needed a meeting, and I needed a synagogue. I needed to get help to find those spiritual sources at the time, and that chaplain treated me just like another human being,
Isn't
and
that the way it's supposed to be?
it's supposed to be that way, but there's a lot of proselytizing that can happen. I've seen chaplains go into ER bays and never ask a single thing about that person and start praying with them, not knowing how they would want to, if they wanted prayer. And so I grew up in the South, Mississippi, Tennessee, Arkansas, and being a Jew, I was proselytized a lot. And to not have this chaplain, and mind you, Denise, I didn't know what chaplains were really then. That was only my first introduction. And so he didn't try to convert me, and he didn't ogle over me either. That both of those things can happen as a Jew. And then so he helped me. Just, "What do you need?" And that only hit me of how profound that was many years later as I was already a chaplain. But to go back to your question of what did I do in the Army, I went in as a personnel record specialist, so I got people ready for deployment, mobilization, and then I became the commander's driver, as well as a nuclear biochemical warfare trainer. So
Okay, that's a big gap. I'm trying to picture that in my head.
right?
I can't do it.
Right, and it's just, you go in with a certain military specialty, which was that personnel record specialist. But then when you're in, you get other jobs, right? And these were other jobs, and it was fascinating even one summer, and we were doing, like, 8 hours of NBC training, the nuclear biochemical warfare training, right? Nuclear agents. And I found myself walking around going, "Why are we doing so much? Is it the president's putting out to the governors that if we go to war, it might happen this way?" Well, sure enough, a year later, we were at Desert Storm, and that is one of those pieces. So it was just being able to be a part of that, and being the commander's driver was great. It was fun, and I think, I'm not sure if this affected me spiritually, but it was spiritual in a way because he was very, um, mm, quiet, maybe uptight a little, nervous, and he'd get in the car and go, "Well, sir, are we having fun yet?" And it was at a time when you had those little buttons that said, "Are we having fun yet?" And it was just this opening of connecting with someone at a very vulnerable place, and it's kinda interesting now that I'm talking about it of that's what I do all the time, and that's what I love, is connecting with people at their most vulnerable places.
I would imagine that you do. And I wanted to ask you this too, Candy, as a second generation Holocaust survivor, how has inherited history, and this is important, I think, how has inherited history shaped your understanding of grief and family healing?
Mhm,
Because
mhm,
many of us don't think about that. I really I don't know of anybody who thinks about inherited history. We just get up and go and,
right.
go. I mean, that's what we do. I've
It's
had people say,
huge.
"Well, what did your family do?" I don't know. I
Wow,
didn't know then, I
wow.
don't know now, I don't really care. And I know
Mhm.
that sounds terrible, but there was just nothing in my family history that I found fascinating.
I can't say that I found it fascinating. Today, I find it more fascinating, but what really led me to connect with that is my dad didn't talk about. I knew that my dad came over at 11 years old. I knew that they were, um, a lot was taken from them in '39 when the Nazi regime, Kristallnacht happened, but they never talked about it. And honestly, growing up and having that history, knowing at least that I had that history, even in its minutest form, I think I was even afraid to even learn about the Holocaust, and I didn't ask. We learn about it in religious school. I mean, we learn about it, we hear about it. It's not that, it's just that my family didn't talk about it, and only later I realized that had to be traumatic, but nobody talked about it. And this is the same piece that I talk about, and we can touch on that about when my parents divorced years later, not recognizing that, oh my God, everyone was hurting and nobody was talking about it. And so back to the pieces about being a second generation Holocaust survivor, I am certain that there are certain things my dad was terrified by. There are certain things that happened. There are visuals that I have gotten and a sense of what that was like for him to even have to be blamed for certain things as a Jew when he didn't do it, but needed to take the blame, or maybe even dodging behind buildings. The feeling either being shot at or was shot at. I don't really know, but I know I've had the feeling of being shot at,
Oh my
his
goodness.
fixation. And so the things that I talk about in the book, and I'm even talking about it more now, is that the impact that a child has when a parent doesn't talk about their pain or what they're plagued about or their trauma. Because then, for instance, the piece I mentioned about blame, I felt to blame that I was to be blamed for so much. But that, I believe a piece of that was because he never talked about it. And so there have been times even, and he may not have been able to even tap in. So I've tapped into the bigger Holocaust experience, and literally I have felt a fence around me that I couldn't go beyond. And that, as you can imagine, plays out in many areas in business, in just going forward in life. And then after I worked with it for a while, I would see the fence down, but then wonder, could I go beyond it? And
And do
then
you want to?
exactly, because you don't know what is beyond. And there have been times even after a car accident and with my company and being on workers' comp, and I do talk about this in the book, that I had a meditation and I was already in a meditation. I was aware of was not trusting at that time. I was scared. I was out on leave, my benefits were be taken. People would tell me, okay, workers' comp is going to take care of you. But my inner sense, Denise, was that no, that that organization, whatever, was not going to take care of me because I was Jew. And those were pieces that I had to dive in deeper within my own psyche, within my own energetic experience, my body experience, that I had to go in and heal. And that is the kind of very deep work I do with those spiritual injuries. With that said, I will say this, that what has come from that, and again, I talk about this in the book, I wish my dad had dealt with his trauma. But I also know that it might have killed him because there weren't the resources there are now. And because he made that, I suppose, a conscious decision, I really don't know, not to, he was able to charge forward and make a life for us, albeit the challenges with the divorce and blah, blah, blah. It would probably made a life for us that was possible here. So I recognize both sides of the coin.
Another group of people that really doesn't want to talk about their experiences are Vietnam vets.
Sure.
They just don't want to talk about it ever.
Yeah. Well, it's devastating. And
Yeah.
yet I've been with hospice patients that start to have a sense of being shot at, or a sense of fire and explosion, and you cannot shut those things down. And by the way, what you mentioned in the beginning, I suppose people do die with some of their secrets, and this is probably why a lot of my work was born.
Well, and I wanted to ask you,
Mhm.
why did you write this book? Why the title
Mhm.
Moxie?
Mhm. So, Moxie was one of my mom's favorite words, and she used to play it every single time, Denise, in Scrabble, every time. I don't know how. She got the X, she played the word, she got all the points. And that's how I learned the word. I didn't know the word as a little girl, right? And over time, little bit, she'd go, "You got Moxie, you got Moxie." And I inherited her Scrabble board when she died.
Oh, so
And
you're
2 months
stuck with it. You can't get away with it.
Right, and she and we played games, we played cards, and I was the one of 3 daughters and the youngest, and that's what we did. That was our thing. But 2 months after she died, I asked a friend to come over to play Scrabble with me, and I played that word, and I was like, "Are you kidding me? You're not even here to see it. Like, what?" And all of a sudden, I kind of felt her giggling, and I was so enchanted. I was just it warmed my heart, it made me giggle, and I go, "She's here with me." And I really heard her saying to me, "Everything's gonna be okay." And then, as I mentioned, I knew I was gonna grieve, but I didn't know what this phase of grief was gonna be like. I had lost other people, I had lost jobs, I had been through a divorce, I had, like, a lot of different grief experiences. But what I knew for sure is that I wanted to glean everything from it. Like, I wanted it to be meaningful, and I knew I wanted that, but I didn't know what it really meant, and I knew it was gonna be a spiritual journey, and I began to ask a rabbi or 2, "Do you know of a book that can guide me through the spiritual journey of grief?" And they're like, "No." Another one, "No." And then finally I asked another person, and she said another rabbi, and she said, "No, but if somebody wrote it, I'd buy it." And something got ignited in me. It was this thing that just opened up in me, like, "Oh, oh," like, "Oh." And it wasn't that all of a sudden I go, "I'm gonna write a book." It was just I had felt so dead inside with the loss of my mom, and something awakened, and it just began from there, and I began to write, and it was an energy that would not leave me alone. It was relentless, and there was something that was expanding me, and I was writing about my experience, and I wanted what was possible in grief. And
Say
that's
that
what
again. I think that
yeah.
was very important. Say that again.
I wanted to see what was possible with my grief. I wanted to see I wanted the pain to have meaning. I wanted the pain to teach me something. So many people are afraid of pain. We will run from it, not just physical pain, emotional pain, both, but we'll run from it. Listen, I'm a recovering addict, okay, with food and alcohol, and there is often an empty hole inside of us. And then we might say it's a God-sized hole, a spirit hole, something there's an energetic something that's missing that we don't know. And there's a abyss, dark, dark abyss of pain within us. That's what I'm talking about with spiritual injuries, multiple wounds. And I wanted to learn what it was that this pain was teaching me. All the tears, the puddles and puddles and puddles of tears. And when the music that I talked about in there would open me up, I wanted what was there. I mean, my sisters would say, "Why are you doing this to yourself?" Where I would just be with that emotion. Because most people, like, cut it off, go do something else. And I knew there was something there. And that's the journey of MOXIE because that fiery spirit, that nerve, that gumption to say, "This has meaning. What is it?" That takes courage.
I have to tell you, this is the 3rd time in as many weeks that I've heard somebody use the word gumption. I'm
And you're in
serious.
Louisiana.
I am. But it's not a word that like moxie. There are some words you know what they are, you just don't hear them or see them
Mhm.
or read them. You're the 3rd person to mention the word gumption. Now I'm wondering what the lesson is for me. I'm going to have to go sit with that because it's not an accident. I don't believe in accidents.
No, I don't either. I think you have gumption.
I think I do too, but
Right,
I also
and
think
you
I'm
have
a smart.
MOXIE.
Well, my mother would her way of telling me I had gumption was to tell me that I was an educated smart ass, which I
Yeah,
guess
well,
is the same thing.
right, well, my mom would tell us that her mom and her dad would say she's incorrigible. Well,
Yep.
it's
Yeah,
not a word you hear very often, but it's the same thing.
it is, and I can spell it too.
Right, me
So
too.
but you're right, that word gumption, it just keeps leaping out at me, so apparently there is a lesson I have yet to learn,
Mhm,
so thank you.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, you're welcome.
And,
Yeah,
one
mhm,
of the things that you say, and I've been thumbing through the book while we're talking, not too much because I really want to hear what you have to say. I've got sticky notes all over it. But understanding grief, Candy, you say that death is a process, it's not an
mhm,
event.
mhm,
And I know what you mean by that. I really do. I've had a lot of loss in my family. There was a time when I was younger that I wouldn't answer the phone. And I still,
mhm,
to this day, I will not answer the phone after 9 o'clock because somebody's dead or their house is
mhm,
burning down. It's never good.
mhm,
Just don't call me after 9. And, sometimes I'm not, if I ignore it, yeah, it'll go away, but it doesn't. But I repurpose that to say, well, it's not going to be any less dead tomorrow. I'll deal with it tomorrow, which is probably not a good thing, but it saved my sanity.
mhm.
But what do you mean by death is a process? It's not an event because those of us who have lost people or been there with them, we know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, we could say we're all dying, right? From the time
Oh yeah,
yeah, well, from the time we come into this world, we are one day we're going to die, right? The
yeah,
physical
we're
journey,
already winding
right?
down. We don't even know it.
Right. And we don't know when that is. And so what I talk about mainly, and I know when I mention that. And so being a longtime hospice chaplain, I've been with many, many people. I've been with thousands of people between patients and families at the end of life in that last phase. And people think when they first come on hospice, often they'll go, I'm not afraid of dying. So many people will say, I'm not afraid of dying because here today, gone tomorrow. But what people don't really know is that there is a whole process that happens. There's There's anything from, a few years before my mom died, she was in a life review, and I would ask her, "Mom, do you have any wishes?" Because I knew she wasn't medically ready for hospice. And by the way, in this day and time, the average stay on hospice is 40 days. And so it's really not enough time to really talk about anything. Even 6 months really isn't. We should be, I don't use should very often, but we should be talking about these things. I talk about in the book about talking about life and talking about those things that plague us and talking about these pieces of life that happen, that didn't happen, whether they're secrets. We need to be talking about it so that it can change the whole trajectory of our end of life, our grief experience, and for generations to come. But what's happening is people are going through a life review. So this is part of the process. They begin to access maybe it makes sense to the other person, but often it doesn't. That they'll talk about, and this happens more in the very last phases of life, but they'll talk about things of different ages, and they may not make sense to that person that's sitting with them, but they're reviewing aspects. And I would ask my mom, "Mom, do you have any wishes?" And she'd say, "Oh, well, I'd kinda like to see my parents again, and I'd like to see my brothers, but I don't think that's possible." I'm like, "Well, what if it is possible?" You know, this is beginning to entertain what may be possible for her at the end of life and then beyond. And so there's a lot that unfolds. So the body begins to decline. We start to tell stories. So I talk about this as well, is that when a person begins to what we call looping, I call it looping. They they talk about the same thing over and over again. And I've had family members go, "But they're talking about this same thing again and again and again." And I'm like, "There's a reason they're doing that. They're trying to resolve something. They're trying to reconcile with a part of their life." So this is within that process.
So they're basically saying, "This has always bothered me and I need to sort it out."
Right, right. This happened with my mom on a few different pieces. And because I was aware of it, I was able to walk her through it, and she never had to mention it again. So when we can be with it and ask about it and sort of think beyond, we may be able to help them walk through that. And it may actually be beneficial to us as a family. Um, yeah. Yeah. So there's that piece. And then what I call soul travel. People are traveling. And sometimes you'll see this at the very end of life. You'll see it earlier if you're aware of it. But when people are in and out of lucidity, they're traveling, they're soul traveling. And so sometimes things are trying to resolve. Sometimes they're seeing something spiritually. Sometimes they're seeing their loved one. So there's a lot that happens between a diagnosis and actually death.
And then there's this, and I've seen this, I know you have too. It's like all of a sudden they're rallied, they look good, their skin is clear, their eyes are bright. They're probably about 24 hours from death, from what I can tell.
Yeah, or a few days.
Yeah.
This happened for my mom, and I called in my sisters, and she was still at an assisted living, and she was clear as a bell. She had not been, because they do have that confusion that sets in, and part of that confusion is the multi layers that they're trying to review at the same time. And so that part of it, that's from my spiritual place. So medically is very different, and that's why um, people won't be said as transitioning or actively dying, because it's all by what the medical team see, the medical symptoms, the heart changes and all that. And so my mom, she she was beginning to transition. She was rallying, and she was clear. My brother-in-law had died 9 days before, or 6 at that point, 6 days before. So my sister, my oldest sister, was just in this horrific grief, and she was able to be by her bedside and say, "Mom, Dick died." And mom was there for her, like clear as a bell. It's fascinating. And then my other sister was crying by the bedside and said, "Mom, she just, what's wrong, baby?" And she says, "I don't want you to die." And she says, "I'm not going anywhere." She says, "I'm not going anywhere." And she said, and what my sister remembers though is that I'll always be there. And it was
Oh.
so joyful for me to watch this, right? And then I got to do what I do with all my patients. I got to do that for my mom. It was phenomenal.
I would imagine it would be. I wanted to add, we are running out of time, and I'm just I don't even know what to talk about. I'm just listening so carefully. How does your work differ from that of a therapist? Because I think you're doing a lot of both, aren't you?
I'm not a therapist. I don't work like a therapist, but what I do, it can be therapeutic.
Okay, that's
What
what I
that
was.
means is, in my mind, what that means is that it is healing. And and I'm very different than a therapist. As a board-certified clinical chaplain and working spiritually, I work in that deeper context of the energetic experience, the body experience, the somatic experience, and the spiritual experience, and the mystical, and all the different layers that land on our spirit, basically, is the best way I can say. When I sit with someone, it is as if there's a planetarium view that opens up for me. And I am connecting the dots between your experiences because someone will tell me that they are plagued with this or that, and I'll be able to connect it with their earlier experiences to be able to help them understand, number one, of why this is important and why it's impactful and why they've done what they've done and made the choices they've made. And then we can resolve it. And I'll work with people an hour and a half to 2 hours at a time because when a therapist works with someone, they work around 50, 55 minutes. But about 45 minutes into a session, the emotions come up. And then at 55 minutes, those get shut down. They
The
get
bell
turned,
rings, right?
right? This is why I believe that people have been in therapy for 20 years.
Oh my goodness. Well, you've created programs like and say this for me, ReSOULution? Is that right?
ReSOULution.
With
ReSOULution.
SOUL.
Yeah, with the soul in the middle,
Right.
because this is where I work with individuals and entire families from diagnosis to have sacred conversations and connections from diagnosis through grief, death, and beyond. And what I believe happens, it's been my personal experience and my professional experience that when we resolve the pain, the hurt, the shame, the disconnection that we feel inside, often from accumulated loss. So, under that umbrella of grief, that we clear the path for us to connect on a very deep level with our own soul and with the spirit that we know, the spirit that is our true spirit. Call it God, call it source, call it spirit, universe, energy, MOXIE. It's something bigger than us, but we feel deep, deep connection, heart and soul connection. And this is possible.
I believe you. You I'm I'm gonna toss one last question at you because we are
Mm,
running out of time, and I hate that, but you have experienced interest in psychedelics as part of
mhm,
a spiritual exploration. That's not something I'm familiar with. I mean, we all have heard of it.
mhm.
It's not something that I've ever even thought to explore, but now I need to know more. What draws you to that work, and how does it intersect with grief and transformation?
The psychedelic work that I do really came about sort of a back door. I began to work with individual clients who had had their own psychedelic experiences, predominantly with psilocybin.
Is that LSD?
No,
No?
psilocybin and mushrooms.
Oh, okay. See, I
Mhm.
know nothing about it.
That's okay.
Kid you
There are
not.
many different things. Now they're being used in therapeutic ways. And what is important about them is that they are openers. They're heart openers. So where we've been conditioned with SSRIs, like antidepressants and things that shut down, they close down. But when your receptors become open, that you get open to something bigger. And people are able to access trauma and grief easier. Somebody that I worked with had lost a son, and he couldn't access that grief until after he used psychedelics. and it opened up and gave a pathway to working with it. I began being really interested in psychedelics some odd years ago as a veteran. I saw a charity that a soap that I bought was gonna be giving proceeds to psychedelic work with veterans for PTSD, and I became interested then and supported it because we don't need to close ourselves down, we need to open ourselves up. And so the journey that people can go on can open us up to a spiritual experience, a mystical experience, where often there are metaphors. So somebody may see a snake and that may initially scare them, but the snake has meaning, right? And we need to explore. Doing psychedelics is not about a high, it is about opening to something bigger. And it's also, um, I want to say this, it's also a pathway that leads us to the places that need healing and the places where our inner work is. It doesn't mean we don't do inner work, we do. But what it can do is it can make some of those constructs that we've lived by collapse. And when those collapse, meaning a belief, well, I can't be with this emotion, or I'm weak to feel the depth of this emotion, to cry. And this is a lot of what I deal with grief and things that we hold on to, and we hold them in our body, in our psyche, in our spirit. And those things collapse, meaning they might dissolve. They might dissolve some fear. And then we have to look at, well, who am I now? If I don't have those, then I need to see, investigate, explore who I am now. And so it opens us up to that journey of deeper exploration, of other possibilities. Sometimes things will show up that are important, that the person sitting with them has a context, can explain what that means. And that is why I'm part of a group called Transforming Chaplaincy Psychedelic Care Network, because we wanna make sure that things are done ethically. We wanna make sure that we're not, when we open the door for something, we're able to hold that context. So a lot of times right now, there are things that are happening, people don't have that training, and they're sitting with people, but they don't have the spiritual training, the training that shows what might this meaning be? What can we do with that so that we can, benefit from it greatly?
So that is fascinating. Listen, Candy, before we wrap up, what final thoughts would you like to leave with our audience?
Mm. I'd like people to know that there is so much more than the absence of a loved one. So you may start there, and that may be excruciating, but there is so much here for you in the grief journey, the spiritual journey, the things that can open up that help us to live a more fulfilling life in the years we have remaining, as well as help us in our end of life. It changes the whole trajectory of the lived experience, the end of life experience, the grief experience, and can change the lives of our children. So this can change for you for generations to come.
And that's important to know. In fact, I'm going to quote you on that. Listen, everybody, thank you for being with us here today. And today we talked about grief as a sacred process, not just something to endure, not that something to put aside and say you'll go back to it later, which I've been guilty of, but something that can transform us. And we explored inherited trauma, spiritual evolution, family healing, and what it truly means to walk alongside someone at the end of life. So if you or someone you love is navigating loss, I encourage you to pick up MOXIE, a hospice chaplain's journey through grief, and connect with Chaplain Candi Wuhrman at her work at sacredworkwithcandy.com. So thank you for joining us on your Partner in Success Radio. If you found value in today's conversation, be sure to subscribe, share this episode, and leave a review. Oh, and by the way, this book is available on Amazon. Go get it. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and remember, you're never alone in this journey. Candi, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Denise. It has been an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you.
Get your voice heard. If you would like to launch your own far-reaching podcast, contact Denise Griffitts at yourofficeontheweb.com and go to the podcast tab.